Well, hello, it is now 1 o'clock here in Boston. I'd like to welcome you to Building Outstanding UXs with the ControlBar Builder. I am Dave McCormick from Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present today Selwyn Ravens, who is our co-founder and in charge of development here at Alpha, who is going to be going over the new ControlBar Builder, which just came out with the latest release of Alpha Anywhere version 4.3. Two things that you should know: that you can ask questions during this webinar. In fact, we encourage you to, and you can do that by typing them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. The second thing is this session will be recorded, and you'll be able to find a copy of that recording at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let's get started. Hello, Selwyn, are you there?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter. You should see a dialog box on your screen. And I can see your screen, and I'm looking at a PowerPoint.
So are we all set, Dave?
We're ready to go. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, and welcome to everybody who's dialed in today. So today I'm going to focus on the control bar, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important new controls that we've added to the UX component, and it's our feeling that the control bar will become really one of the essential building blocks of all mobile applications. We're confident that all developers who are using the UX component will begin to use the control bar very heavily. So basically what we'd like to do today is first of all just simply, talk a little bit about the control bar in general, but most of the time we're going to spend actually looking at real examples and sort of going through the concepts of the control bar. So first of all, the control bar is designed for the UX component. So at this stage, the control bar cannot be used in the grid. It's only in the UX. In the future, we might decide to allow the control bar to be added to a grid component as well. But right now, it's exclusively for the UX component. And basically, the benefit of the control bar is that it allows you to create some very elegant user interfaces very easily, with much less code than you would previously had to do. And because there's much less code and fewer controls in the UX component itself, the resulting component is much lighter weight than it would have been if you had not used control bars. And as I mentioned earlier, we think that the control bar is really an essential tool for all mobile app developers. The typical use cases for control bars are for panel headers and panel footers, or to just create general purpose toolbars, much like you see in desktop applications, where you have basically a bar that contains a list of buttons, and also for displaying pop-up messages that give feedback to a user in an application. So typical use cases for pop-up messages would be things like confirmation dialogues, wait messages, and just simply status messages. So we're going to basically discuss some of the core concepts that are necessary to understand in order to effectively use control bars, and then we're going to just go straight to Alpha and start demoing these concepts. So basically, the key concepts that you'll need to understand when you start working with control bars are data, editors, actions, layouts, layout lines, and disclosures. Now, I should point out that all of the concepts are discussed in the documentation in quite a bit of detail. So I'll show you a little later on where to find the doc on the control bar. So the first thing is that a control bar has data. In the same way that a list control has data or a viewbox control has data, a control bar has data, and the data in a control bar can be changed programmatically. Now, the reason that the control bar has data is many of the controls in the control bar can be bound to data. So, for example, if you have a label for a button, you can either set the label of the button to some specific piece of text like click here, or you can set the label of the button to the value of some data object, and then when you change the value of the data object, the label on the button would change. This actually should not be editors but items. So items are the things that you put on the control bar, and the most common of the things that you put on control bar are either buttons or HTML labels, but you can also put things like editors, toggle buttons, button lists, and disclosure buttons on the control bar, and we'll discuss what we mean by disclosures. Actions are the JavaScript code that gets executed by one of the items that you put on a control bar. So, for example, you might have a item which is a button item which you put on the control bar, and then you might say that when you tap on that button you want to execute an action, and the action will have a name like action 1, and then action 1 will have some associated JavaScript that will get executed. Now, another really key point about control bars is that a control bar can have more than one layout. So in the same way that a list control or a view box control or a form view control can all have multiple layouts, a control bar can also have multiple layouts. And the reason that having multiple layouts is so important is that you can then go ahead and define different layouts for different form factors. So you might, for example, design one layout to be used on a phone when the phone is in portrait mode, another layout to be used when the phone is in landscape mode, yet another layout to be used by a tablet in portrait mode, and another layout to be used by a tablet when it's in landscape mode. And through JavaScript you can dynamically change the control bar to display different layouts. A layout is what the control bar shows, and the layout itself is comprised of lines. So a control bar can have one line of controls, two lines of controls, three lines of controls, etc. And each line of controls is divided into three sections: a before section, a middle section, and an after section. So, for example, if you wanted to have a control bar that has a button on the left, some static text in the center, and then a button on the right, you would basically create a layout line, and you would put the first button in the before section, the static text in the middle section, and the button on the right in the after section. And then finally, disclosures are little pop-ups that can be displayed by the control bar. So when you tap on a disclosure button, for example, it will display a disclosure. So we're going to be demoing and explaining all of these concepts in hands-on demo during the course of this webinar. So now let's move on to the actual demo itself. So I'm going to now go here and switch over to my computer, and let's go here to the web control panel, and we're going to start out now from scratch. So let's create now a completely blank UX component. So I'll go here and I'll make this into a mobile app. So I'll go here and add a panel card. I'll turn on the mobile preview, and then I'll right click on the panel card and say I'd like to add a panel header. So when I do that now, we've changed the prompt now to say, would you like to include a control bar? And the reason that we've done that is that it's going to now be really the go-to control for inside a panel header or panel footer. So you can see now I've added a control bar to this component. I haven't actually defined anything about the control bar right now, and so when I go now to preview this, I can see there's my control bar, but it's not yet been defined. So before going any further in discussing how to go ahead and build a control bar, I think it might be useful to actually show some real-world applications that have been built using control bars. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually go to one of the sample applications that ships with Alpha, which was built using traditional panel headers and panel footers. So you can see here, if I go here to demo app over here, which I built by simply going over here to new and choosing the sample disconnected app over here. So this app that I'm looking at right now is this sample disconnected app. And if we look at this app here, we can see that inside the panel header over here, basically inside the panel headers, we have just traditional buttons. So here's a panel header, and inside this panel header we've basically got standard UX controls. We've got a button, and then we've got another button which we want to have right justified. But in order to get this button to be right justified, we had to go ahead and wrap it in a container and then go and set the container style to float right. So while it's not necessarily that difficult, it certainly wasn't that intuitive on how to go about building this component. So when we run the component, we can see here there's our traditional panel header over here, built the old-fashioned way, and you can see that there's my back button, etc. So now let's go and take a look at how this same component gets reimagined using ControlBar. So I'll go back now, and you can see that when you go and create the new component in the template, here we have the same sample disconnected app, but this time using ControlBars. So let's go ahead now and open that app using ControlBars. And the first thing to notice is that the app that uses ControlBars has many fewer controls in it than the app that doesn't use ControlBars. So here's the app that does not use ControlBars. You can see there's a lot more controls than the version of the app that does use ControlBars. So let's go ahead now and run this. So we can see that we have our control bar across the top. And the reason that the control bar background is black is that that's part of the theme that we're currently using. So we're using the alpha theme, and the alpha theme specifies that a panel header background should be black, and therefore the control bar picks up the background of the panel header. So if I went and changed my theme and changed the background color of a panel header to, say, blue, then the control bar would have a blue background. So now when I tap on a row here, we can see we navigate to a different panel, and the control bar now has changed. The control bar now has the back button over here. It has the label of the ID of the record that I'm currently looking at, etc. So if I go ahead and press back, then if I go here and press the menu key, the flyout menu over here is also done in the control bar, and this is called the disclosure. So we'll talk about how you build these disclosures. So this here is part of the same control bar. I can go ahead there and close it. When I click this button over here, I get another disclosure. So this is another disclosure over there, etc. So this is an example of an app that, in this particular case, we have two control bars in the applications. But now, next I'm going to go to another example which is much more complex, but was actually built with a single control bar control. So I'm going to open up this demo alpha launch app over here. This is called Northwind application. This is an app that shows data in a mobile app from the Northwind customer table, the Northwind order table, and the Northwind order details table. And you can see that the entire app, which is quite a large app over here, has only a single control bar in it. So if we go here and look at this, we see there's only a single control bar in this entire app, but it's a complex control bar that has many different layouts in it. So let's first go ahead and actually run it. So as we run it now, we'll see that there's our control bar across the top. When I click on this button, I get my disclosure menu over there. If I tap on a row, the control bar changes completely in the sense that it now shows a totally different set of controls, but in actual fact, we'll see that this is all the same control bar. If I go ahead now and click again, you can see the control bar changes its display, but again, it's the same control bar being used for these different panels. If I hit save now and then hit done, I can go all the way back. Here's my menu. If I say sort, for example, that brings up another control bar where I can say I want to sort by city or by country or by company name, and when then I tap this X here, this control bar goes away and the previous control bar comes into play. And notice how the control bars, when you swap from one control bar to another, you can set the animation style. So you'll notice here when I bring up the sort, the control bar comes in with a little bit of animation, and when I turn it away, the control bar goes away with some animation turned on. So if we go back now to the actual control bar builder here, so you'll see that we have many different layouts for this control bar. So there's the main view over there. There's our hamburger menu. There's our sync bar. There's our about bar, etc. So this control bar, there's our sort control bar. So this control bar itself here is made up of many different individual layouts, and through JavaScript we decide which particular control bar layout to display. But the net result is that this whole UX component here, which has several different panels, is built using a single control bar. So let's go back now to fundamentals and actually start building out this control bar. So the first thing that I'm going to do is change my my component style to the new alpha style. So now if I go here and save it, I'll just call this demo 1. And if we go ahead now and we run this, we'll see that we now have our black background, but the control bar itself has not yet been defined. So let's go now and start defining this control bar. So in order to define the control bar, you'll see the control bar has a builder over here, which you can open either by tapping on the smart field over there or double tapping on the control bar inside the list of controls. So the control bar builder is similar in concept to the way the list is configured with the list builder, or the way a view box is configured, or the way a form view control is configured. There's a rich builder over here that lets you set all the different properties of the control bar, and you can get very quickly to the control bar documentation. There's the control bar user guide, which explains the concepts of the control bar, and then there's the control bar API documentation, which is useful for JavaScript programmers who are trying to write JavaScript code to manipulate properties of the control bar. So the first thing that we can do is go and define some of the data in the control bar. So let's go here and add an item called, say, label 1, and we'll give this a default value of hello. Then the next thing that we'll do is go and create some items. So the first item that we'll create will just be some HTML, and we can go to the HTML and actually type in any text that we want. So we could go here and type in label 1, or we can bring up the builder, and instead of typing in a static value, we can say display a value from a data element. So you can see here that we're saying that the label that is shown by this HTML item will be whatever value the label 1 data object has. And then later on you'll see that when I programmatically change the value of this data item, the display value in the control bar will be updated. So now let's go and add another item. So this time we'll add a button. So we'll go there and add a button, and we'll basically, let's go here and say that this button is going to be, say, image followed by text. Then we'll go and choose the image. We'll choose an SVG icon. So I'll just go there and choose any icon. So let's go there and choose, say, that icon over there. Excuse me, and then I'll go and define the text. So I'll say here information. So at this point I've defined a button, but I haven't specified what the button is actually going to do. And the way that I specify the button action is I go to actions over here and I create an action. So let's call this first action action 1. The name of the action is actually irrelevant. And then I'll just go here and say alert. This is action 1. So now I've defined an action. Now the action itself can be much more complex, of course, and so you can use action JavaScript to create complex actions that maybe launch other components or anything that action JavaScript is capable of doing. But here we're going to just go with a really simple action. And now we can go back to our button over here and bind that action to, say, the click event. We can bind different actions to the down hold event, the up event, the down event, or the swipe event, but we're going to just focus on the click event. So at this point now we've defined the data that this control bar uses, and we've defined two items, but we haven't defined any layouts yet. So we'll go now to control bar layouts, and you can see this is telling us that we haven't defined any layouts at all. So I'll go here and add my first layout, and I can give it a name. And then here is the layouts, and the layout, as I mentioned before, is comprised of one or more lines. So right now we don't have any lines, so we'll go and add a line. And then here is the builder for the line, and the line itself is divided into three sections: before, middle, and after. So one obvious question is, well, why did we call it before, middle, and after, and not left, center, and right? And obviously, in the case where the control bar is laid out horizontally, then before is in fact left, and middle is in fact center, and after is in fact right. But control bars are not limited to horizontal displays. Control bars can also be displayed vertically. And in that case, the before section is the top of the control bar. The middle section is the vertical center of the control bar. And the after section is the bottom of the control bar. So we'll go here and we'll add our button to the before section. And then we'll go here and add our HTML to the center section, and then click OK. And you can see now here's our preview over there of the control bar. So before we actually go ahead and run it, let's just sort of go through some of the other tabs over here. So disclosures is where you would define disclosures, and we'll go ahead and look at that a little later on. CSS is where you can create any CSS that you want to use in the control bar. And the nice thing about this is that you can define the CSS specifically for this control bar, or you can define the CSS at the UX component level. So if you define the CSS just for this control bar, then you're not going to run into namespace conflicts, which means that if you'd go ahead here and you define a CSS class called, say, button1, and then and you say that's color red, and then you create a second control bar and you create the same CSS class name called button1, but you set it to, say, color green, those two CSS definitions will not conflict with each other as they would if you had defined them at the UX component level. And then here you can define JavaScript that gets executed by the control bar. So let's go ahead now and click OK. Save it, and now go into working preview, and you can see now we have our button on the left, we have our message in the center, and we have no button over there on the right. And then if we go ahead and we tap the button, there's our JavaScript action. Now you'll recall that when I previously showed the demo mobile app that was built using standard panel headers and panel footers, when we wanted to create a right justified button, we had to go to some trickery to put the button in a container and then set the container style to float right. But now if I want to do that, it's really easy, because all I need to do is go to the control bar layout over here, double click on lines, take this button, remove it from the before section, add it to the after section now. And now when I basically run the component, you can see that this button is going to be right justified regardless of the control bar layout. So as I switch to different layouts, the button is always going to be nicely right justified. So this is basically here the really basic concept of a control bar, which is that it allows you to put controls in a bar across, and use it to create the UI of your application without having to create individual controls. So next, let's take a look now at how we can control the data in the control bar. So we're going to basically now go and change the value of the data element in the control bar to something else in order to change the value of this message over there. And we'll do that using a little bit of Action JavaScript, but of course once you get familiar with the Action JavaScript, you can just go ahead and write the code yourself. So we'll go here now and we'll put in a button, and we'll give this button a label which is change control bar title. And then we'll go to Action JavaScript, so we'll double click on it, we'll go to Action JavaScript, and we'll choose control bar actions. So the action that we want to do is we want to update some control bar data. The control bar that we want to modify is control bar number 1. The data value that we want to update was called label 1. And let's go now and set a value for label 1. So we'll go ahead now and we'll say that label 1 is equal to alpha anywhere. Now you can see here that this is just a standard JavaScript expression, so we could just as easily basically have JavaScript on the right hand side of this message. We could basically call a JavaScript function to set the value. So let's go ahead now and click OK, and we can specify that when we update the control bar, we'd like to see some animation going on. And if we click OK now and then say view the JavaScript, we can see that this is the JavaScript that's going to be executed. So what's going on over here is we are getting a pointer to the control bar using the standard getControl method, and then we're using the control bar's update method where we specify an array of data values that we'd like to update and an array of values that we'd like to update. So in this case, we're only updating one value, the label 1 value with alpha anywhere, but we could update many values all at once. And then we've specified that we'd like to have some animation going on. So let's go ahead now, save that, close this, and now we'll, oops, let's see what happened there. I think I might have messed something up. Let's switch over to IE so we can see if we get an error message. Okay, I messed up this action over here. So let's edit and just quickly turn off animation and see if I made a mistake over here. So specify the values. I don't think I need that semicolon over there because the example says don't use semicolons, so sorry about that. I think I can turn animation back on. Let's save it, go back to working preview now. Okay, so there we go. So now I'm going to press this button, and you can see that we changed the label over here to alpha anywhere, and when we did it, we saw a little bit of animation taking place. Now we don't have to have that animation. So in this particular case, we set the value of this data value automatically, but we can also set the value we set the value manually, but we can also set the value automatically by watching other values. So let's go ahead now and actually find another example that does that. So I'm going to see if I can find a good example. Let's see here. I don't think this is what I'm looking for. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just build it from scratch. So we'll go back to the Demo 1 app over here, and instead of basically having a button over here, let's go ahead, let's delete that button, and now let's go here and put in a list control. So I'll just call this, say, list 1. And just to keep things simple, I'm going to just put some static data in this list. So I'll go here and say static data and get some sample data over there. And let's go now and build the list layout. So we'll go first name, last name, and city, and then we'll specify that the value that this list returns is the last name field. So now we basically have a list control inside a panel, and let's say that what we'd like to do is when we tap on a row in the list, we'd like to set this message over here to the last name of the row. So we'll go to this list and we'll set, say, fill container. And then what we're going to do is go back to our control bar, and we'll go to this data element and we'll edit it now. And instead of having the value be hand-coded over here, we're going to say update the value automatically based on a watch event. So there's our watch event. The control that we're going to watch is this list over there. And we're going to basically say that the JavaScript that we want to use to set the value of the list is going to basically be dialog.object.get value of list number 1. And so we'll go here and we'll say initial value. We'll just actually type in the word none so we can see that there is an initial value. And now we'll go ahead and run this now. So we can see that there's no value there, but when we tap over there, we should be seeing this value update. We're not. I'm not quite sure what I've done, what I did wrong over here. Let's go and take another look at this. Controls to watch, label 1. Oh, here's my mistake here. I need to go here and say var val equals, and then I need to say return val. So let's try this again now. And you can see that as I tap on different rows, the control bar is automatically watching the value of the list, and when the value of the list changes, the data over here is going to go ahead and update. So at this point, we basically created a very, very simple control bar, but we've shown off some concepts like buttons and HTML controls. What we haven't done is show off any of the more advanced features of the control bar. So what I'm going to do now is just go through some of the samples that we've created that are designed to illustrate different control bar features. So let's go here and open up this one, which is setting the active layout. So I mentioned earlier that a control bar can have many different layouts and that you can dynamically choose which layout to use based on whether the device may be in portrait mode or landscape mode, or whether it's a tablet or a phone, etc. So you can see here we have a control bar layout that says portrait phone, and we have a list of available layouts here. So let's go there, for example, and choose phone landscape, and then go ahead here and say set layout. So you can see we've changed the layout. If we go there to tablet, you can see we've changed the layout, and when we changed the layout, we saw that there was a little bit of animation going on. So let's go take a look now at how that actually happened. So we'll go back to our control bar, and when we look at this control bar, we see that we just have 3 HTML items that just have little labels on them. So this one says phone portrait, this one says phone landscape, and this one says tablet. But if we go to the layouts here, we'll see that we have 3 different control bar layouts defined. The first one is phone portrait, which is our default layout. Then we have one called phone landscape and one called tablet. And in each case, we put a different item on the layout. So this first one uses HTML1, second one uses HTML2, and the third one uses HTML3. And we've also specified that this phone portrait layout is the default layout. So that's going to be the layout that is shown initially. So now that we've defined those 3 different layouts, we can go here, and again, this was done. This could be done using Action JavaScript, but you can see here we've switched from Action JavaScript to code mode. Actually, let's just go back and do that in Action JavaScript initially, or at least see what the basic code is that needs to be done. So we'll go here to other controls, buttons, and we'll bring up Action JavaScript again. So I'll just type in control bar actions, and you can see here we'll choose set the active control bar layout, control bar number 1, and then we'll choose, these are the available layouts, say tablet, and then I'll turn animation on, and then I can just go and peek at the code that was generated, and I can see here that this is the code that was generated. So I just copy that code to the clipboard, and I used that code in this button over here. But the thing that was different was that we are going to read the value of the layout that we want to display from this drop-down box. So we get the value from the drop-down box in this line over here, and then we set the active layout to whatever value we read out of the drop-down box, and we have animation turned on. So let's go back again and run this now. So here we go. So choose our active layout, portrait, and then go ahead there and set the layout. So in this case, we were going through a very deliberate action to set the active layout, but this can be completely automated through scripting. So, and there's two ways of automating it through scripting. One would be to go to properties and then go here to responsive design and create responsive rules over here that would allow you to set the active layout. So you can see if I go here and I'll just choose phone, tablet as my rule set, and then add an action. We have actions basically to set the active layout in a control bar. So this would be one way of dynamically changing which layout a control bar used programmatically. But another way of doing it would just simply be going into the control bar itself, and then you can see that in properties that we have an ability here to dynamically set the control bar at runtime, and then here's some JavaScript that is going to basically return what the name of the control bar that we want to use. So you can see here we've said that if the screen width is more than 600, then use the tablet control bar layout. If the screen width otherwise, then use the phone landscape tablet. And this automatic code over here will execute every time the control bar is refreshed or every time a panel is resized. So this is basically how you can, by having multiple layouts in a control bar, how you can basically have a single control bar for a very complex UX component that has multiple panels, and how you can dynamically choose which control bar layout to use depending on what the active panel card is. So let's go now to button toggles. So again, let's run this first and then explain it over here. So here we basically have a control bar. It's got a button that says move, and then another button over here that's a button toggle. So right now when I tap the move button, you can see we're moving from one row to the next row downwards. But when I tap this button over here, the toggle button, you can see it changes state from pointing down to pointing up, and now when I press the move, I'm moving upwards. So let's go take a look now at how that was done. So if we go now to our items, we'll see we just have our regular HTML label that is displaying the context of a data value called app name. So if we go here to app name, you can see that we're watching the current value in list. So this is what we did previously. We're basically saying whatever the list value is, use that as the label. Then we have another control, which is a button, and this button executes an action called next over there, and this next action here is defined as get a pointer to the list and then just navigate either up or down in the list. So this is how we basically go up or down in the list, and we go basically down if the value of data.toggle state is set to false, and if it's set to true, then we go up, we go previous up. And then finally we have a toggle button over here. It's a two-state button. Basically, toggles can be two-state or multi-state. A multi-state button is a toggle that each time you tap on it, it goes to the next state. So a two-state toggle goes from one state to the next state back to the first state, whereas a multi-state toggle goes from the first state to the second state to the third state to the fourth state and then back, say, to the first state. So we have a two-state toggle here. We'll say we'd like to keep it pressed, which means that the button will show its state automatically. And then we've specified that the data variable that this two-state toggle button will set is called toggle state. So there'll be a value in this data object here called toggle state that'll either be true or false. So we've set its initial value to false over there. We've specified that we want this icon when it's in its unpressed state and this icon when it's in its pressed state. So we want the down icon when the button toggle has not been pressed, and then the up icon when it has been pressed. So this is basically what the toggle does. And essentially what this toggle button is doing is ultimately just simply setting the value of a variable called toggle state. So if we actually go ahead and look at the JavaScript definition of this control bar here, we'll see that basically this is the definition of the control bar. This is essentially what this builder is building, and we'll see that there's a data element here called toggle state, which is being set by pressing on that button. And then you can see over here in actions, we're reading the value of the toggle state data variable to decide whether we should be going up or down. And the help over here tells us that in our action, we can reference this .data .toggle state to read the value of one of these data items. So let's go ahead now and run this. So when I run this now and I click on this toggle state button, we've just set the value of that data variable. And then when I press on this button over here, this button is deciding whether it should move up or down by reading the value of the data variable. So that's our two-state button. Let's go ahead now and take a look at, say, button lists. So a button list is just a series of buttons, and if you look at this component over here, we'll see that we have a button list across the bottom here. We have 3 buttons, and we're using this button list here to set the active panel in a panel navigator. So if we go take a look at this, we'll see that our items here has a single item over there. Actually, this doesn't look right. Oh, sorry, I need to be in the footer. We have a single item, which is a button list. The button list has a builder where you can specify each of the buttons. So in this case, we've got 3 buttons in our button list, and you can specify the label, the icon, and then also the value. So when the first button is pressed, it's going to have a value of home. When the second button is pressed, it's going to have a value of charts, and when the third button is pressed, it's going to have a value of settings. And we've specified that when you press on a button, it's going to set a data value called button list panel selector dot value. So that's where the values are being selected. And then let's take a look at how it actually goes ahead and changes the let's go here to actions. We have an action here called set panel, and what set panel is doing is it's reading the value of that variable. Now the variable in this case is an array because a button list allows more than one button to be pressed, but in this case we've turned the button list to only allow a single button, so therefore it's an array that has a length of 1, so we read the first value out of the array, and then we call the standard panel set active to set the active panel. And this action called set panel is being called by this button. So every time the button state changes in this button list, we call this action set panel over there, and this basically is how we create a very common pattern in mobile apps where you have a tab bar at the bottom which selects different panel cards. This particular component is one of the templates that you can use. So you can see here, if you go to I believe it's tab buttons with control bars. This template here allows you to quickly get this setting over there. So let's go ahead now and take a look at some of the other predefined components. So this one here is disclosures, so let's go ahead and see what this one does. So when I press this button over here, we get a disclosure. So this particular pattern here is designed to emulate something that we see in the Gmail iPhone app. They have an icon on their button bar across the top that pops down an additional set of choices. So let's go ahead now and look at this. So we'll go here to control bar properties, and we'll see that this particular control bar here has two layouts. It has a main layout over there, which basically has a disclosure button in the after section, and then it has another layout called submenu, which just happens to have a whole bunch of buttons that have been defined as icon only. So the main control bar layout here has this disclosure button, and if we go look at items and we look at disclosure button, we can see that disclosure button is one of these controls here called the disclosure button. And when we tap on the disclosure button, the layout that we would like to display is this layout here called submenu. And the position that we'd like to display it in is called extend. So when we double click on this to bring up the builder, you can see that there's a very rich set of options for where a particular disclosure should be displayed. So we've said extend, which means basically go out from the bottom of the current control bar and extend out further. But there are all of these other options which are used in different use cases. So when we go now and we run this, we'll see now that we basically tap this, we get our disclosure, we have all of our buttons, and the thing about these buttons here, we've specified that as soon as you click on the button, the disclosure should cancel. So this is a way, for example, of exposing additional options that don't necessarily fit on the control bar. And in this case, the disclosures are being displayed underneath, but we could just as easily display this button in a vertical display down the side there. So let's go ahead now and change the position from extend to, say, screen right. Let's go screen before, sorry, outside before, and see what happens when we do that now. So now when we tap this button over here, we get basically our button bar floating in from the right-hand side. So this is a good example of the power and flexibility that disclosures give you for building different types of UIs. Show hide lines is another powerful feature. So if we go and look at this control bar over here, we can see that this control bar has a single layout, but that this layout itself is based on two different lines. There's our first line that displays HTML1, and there's our second line that displays HTML2, but that the visibility of these lines is controlled over here in line properties by this data variable. So if this variable show line 1 is true, then line number 1 will be shown. And if this variable over here show line 2 is true, so then line number 2 will be shown. So let's go ahead now and run this. So we can see that initially line 1 and line 2 are shown. So I click on show line 1 over there, and so hide line 1, show line 1, show line 2, hide line 2. So basically by just setting values, and this is the standard action JavaScript over here, that is setting values, setting the value of this show line variable to true or false. We're controlling the visibility of control bar lines. So that's another powerful way of being able to modify dynamically control bars. So the final thing that I'd like to really focus on is control bar messages, because this is really one of the one of the most powerful features of the control bar is this ability to display messages very easily. So let's go ahead now and again create a brand new component. So I'll go here and say controls. I'll put in a panel card. I'll turn on mobile preview. I'll set a panel header, and I'll say include a control bar. And then I'll go to this control bar. And what I'm going to do over here is import messaging functions. So the messaging features in the control bar are built in by just adding some predefined actions, items, and JavaScript. So I'm going to go here and say import messaging functions. So it shows me here what type of messages you can display using these functions. We've got like a wait message, a one-button dialog that is typically used for just information, and a two-button dialog that is used for confirmation. So I'll say, okay, add this to my control bar. And we can see now that we've added a whole bunch of data, we've added a whole bunch of items, and we've added a whole bunch of JavaScript. So we've added code to our control bar, which we can now go ahead and call. So let's say that we'd like to build a control bar that has a button that puts up a disclosure message. So we'll go here and we'll say add a button over here, and we'll call this button say delete something. And then we'll go to this action. We'll leave the action undefined for the time being. We'll go to the control bar layout, and we'll go add a new layout. We'll call this our main layout. And then we'll go here and add a line, and then add a button over there. So right now this button doesn't do anything, and we want to set this as our main control bar, so as our default. So when we go ahead now and we display this, what we'd like to do now is put up a little dialog that says, are you sure you want to delete this? So let's go here, go back to our control bar. Oops. Let's just go ahead then and save this and see why I get that. Oops, I've got broken something there. So I'm going to just go ahead now and start over again. It's just, I'm not quite sure what happened over there, so I'll just okay, so let's get back to where we were. So here's our control bar again. We'll go here and we'll import the messaging functions. Go ahead, OK. We'll go here and add our button, which is going to say delete. Go ahead there and press OK. We'll change the button label to delete. We'll go here and create a layout which we'll call our main layout. We'll add a line and we'll put in our delete button over there. Click OK. We'll set this as our default layout, and then we're going to go now and define an action for this button. So we'll go here to actions, and we'll go here and we'll say show confirm. And we're going to then now go, let's just remove the system comment over there, and now we'll go here to the genie and say display a message, and the message that we'd like to display is a confirmation message, and we'll say here the title will be delete, and then here we'll say are you sure you want to delete, and then for our OK action we'll just go here and temporarily just put in say alert do the delete. So we've defined, so click OK there. So this is the code. We'll copy this code to the clipboard, and then we'll just paste this code in over here. So this is the code here that is needed to display a confirmation button. You can see it's very simple. It's just got the heading, the body, and then the OK function over there. And then we'll go back to our item here. So here's our delete button. We'll just click on our action. We'll click on the click action there, and we'll say show confirm. And now we'll go ahead now and we'll run this. So when we run this now, we're going to see our delete button over there. When we press the delete button, okay, I didn't get the, I'm not quite sure why I didn't get the show confirm message coming up. Let's go to actions, show confirm. That looks correct. So I've done something wrong, but I'm not quite sure what. But oh, there we go. So there's our confirmation message. If we go ahead and click the OK button, there's the JavaScript that would get executed. So we've very easily, we've used the ControlBar disclosure feature to add a new button to the ControlBar. So I think at this point I've gone through quite a few examples. I do want to mention that there is extensive documentation on the ControlBar. There are a large number of videos that explain all of the concepts. You can get to the documentation, as we discussed earlier, by just simply going over here to the home page and either going to the user guide or the API documentation, and you can work your way through the examples. But I feel pretty confident that once you understand the basic concepts of the ControlBar, that you'll be using the ControlBar extensively in the UX components that you create. So Dave, at this point I'd just like to stop and just see if there's any questions I can answer before we end the session.
Yes, there are in fact a few questions, so why don't we go ahead and get started on those. One question, which was asked sort of early on, was how do you hide and show items based on login status? Like maybe if you're logged in as an administrator, there is some button or function you didn't want someone to see. How would you go about doing that?
So basically, everything in the ControlBar, the visibility of everything in the ControlBar is defined by show hide expressions that are bound to data. So basically, for example, any particular button over here has a show expression, and this show expression is based on data. So what you would need to do is in the after login event, you would need to decide in your code which buttons you wanted to show and which buttons you wanted to hide, and your after login JavaScript code would look at the name of the group that the user was in, if he was an admin or in R&D or in the marketing group, and then your code would have to set the value of the variables in the ControlBar to show and hide items.
Excellent, thank you. A quick question is, you've been showing this in terms of mobile applications, but could this be used in a web application as well, and would it make sense to?
Absolutely. So basically, in a web application that is built using UX components, the ControlBar is definitely something that you can use. And I didn't point out, but the ControlBar is not limited to a panel header or a panel footer. So for example, if I go and delete this panel header over there right now, and now I just have a regular panel card, and let's just sort of maybe go and put in a bunch of buttons above it. Let's just put in, say, 3 buttons over there, turn off the brake, maybe turn on the brake there, delete this button over there. We can see now that the ControlBar is just like any other control inside the flow of the component. There's my delete button, but I could have a whole bunch of buttons over here. And so the ControlBar it is true that it's limited to the UX component, but it is certainly not limited to mobile applications. So if you're using a UX component in your desktop web applications, I think you'll find the ControlBar to be extremely useful.
Great. It looks like we have time for maybe 1, possibly 2 more questions. And so the next one is, can it be used in a UX when the UX is displayed on a tabbed UI?
Yes.
Okay. So that was a quick one. And the other one is, does the control bar support scrolling of the content? So if you have more buttons than are visible on one screen, can you swipe to bring the other buttons into view?
Currently, no.
Okay.
I mean, you could if you were to write a little bit of your own code, because what the control bar supports is two different types of layouts. So you can see that in this particular case, this control bar is rigid. It has a before, middle, and after sections. But you can also go to a custom layout here, which is just any HTML that you want. And inside the custom layout, you can put your individual buttons. So here's my cancel button, my confirm button, my delete button. So I can create any HTML that I want to display the control bar buttons. And then I could write my own JavaScript to add drag scrolling to that particular piece of HTML. So it's not built into the control bar, but certainly it is feasible if you wanted to put drag scrolling. But I think that the metaphor that we would typically want to recommend is that if there's not enough space on a control bar to display all the buttons, that you then put a hamburger button that displays a slide-out menu with the additional buttons, since that's a very common metaphor that one sees. But yes, you could if you really want to do horizontal scrolling on the control bar items.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of the hour, so I want to thank you very much, Selwyn, for presenting. For those of you who had questions that we couldn't get to, please send them into guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com, and I will see that they get answered. So thank you, everyone who participated, asked questions, and just showed up. We hope to see you at another webinar in the near future. A copy of today's recording will be posted at videos.alphasoftware.com. Thanks again, and goodbye.